Jaafar Jackson is opening up about something the Jackson family has wanted for years, a chance for Michael Jackson to finally speak for himself. The first Michael movie ended in 1988, right at the edge of the King of Pop's glow, stopping just before things got complicated. The sequel might not have that luxury. Jaafar Jackson, the nephew playing his uncle on screen, is now speaking openly about wanting the next film to finally give Michael Jackson a voice in his own most controversial chapter: the child sexual abuse allegations that followed him for the rest of his life. In this video, we're breaking down exactly what Jaafar said, why the first film legally couldn't go where the story originally intended, and just how much money this billion-dollar biopic is putting into Jackson family pockets. Michael became the highest-grossing music biopic of all time, crossing $1 billion worldwide. But the version that hit theatres wasn't the version originally planned. Director Antoine Fuqua and his team had actually filmed material covering the 1993 allegations against Jackson and the investigation into his Neverland ranch. Then the Jackson estate's attorneys discovered a serious allegation. A settlement made to accuse Jordan Chandler explicitly barred him from being depicted or even mentioned in a film. That single legal complication forced a massive rework. The production had to shoot additional footage and rebuild the entire back half of the story, ultimately deciding to end the film years earlier than planned, right around the peak of Jackson's fame during the bad era. It's worth remembering the fuller picture here too. Jackson denied allegations of abuse throughout his life. He was charged in a separate case in 2003 and acquitted on all counts following his 2005 trial. Years later, in 2019, Wade Robson and James Safechuck detailed new allegations against Jackson in the HBO documentary Leaving Neverland. It remains one of the most disputed and painful chapters in modern pop culture history, and it's the chapter the first film simply didn't touch. In an interview with GQ Middle East, Jaafar was asked directly how far the sequel might go into that territory. He was careful not to make promises, pointing out that the screenplay is still being written and that the decision isn't ultimately his to make. But he was clear about what he's hoping for. The first film, as Jaafar described it, focused on Michael from his roots. He said he believes the second film could offer even more insight from Michael's own point of view, because, in his words, the allegations have always come from someone else's story, someone else's version of events, and, as he put it, largely driven by an agenda. Jaafar said the absence of Michael's own perspective has long frustrated the Jackson family, especially when conversations turned to his later, more difficult years. That's really the issue we've been having as a family, not having Michael's voice being heard, he said. I think that's very, very important, especially in the late years. It's important to be precise about what Jaafar is and isn't saying here. He isn't confirming the screenplay will directly address the allegations. And Lionsgate hasn't detailed how extensively Part 2 will engage with that period of Jackson's life. What Jaafar has offered is a clear statement of hope that if the sequel does go there, it centres his uncle's own perspective rather than leaving the story to be told entirely by others. For Jaafar, this isn't just about responding to accusations. He said he wants the films to preserve the person he actually knew underneath the fame and the controversy, and he believes splitting the story across two movies gives audiences more room to see that side of him. He described Michael as someone whose fundamental nature, in his view, never changed despite everything swirling around him. He never changed that purity, that sense of always wanting to find the good in other people, Jaafar said. And no matter all the stuff he went through, how he was treated, what things were said about him, he never stopped treating people with kindness. He added that even when his uncle was, in his words, broken by everything he went through, his heart stayed the same. And that's the quality Jaafar specifically hopes comes through in the sequel. The next film isn't necessarily going to pick up exactly where the first one left off and march chronologically ahead. Lionsgate Motion Picture Group chairman Adam Fogelson said the filmmakers can move both forwards and backwards in telling Jackson's story, since huge stretches of his life and career, including plenty from the period the first film already covered, remain unexplored. there's also a practical head start built in. Fogelson has said roughly 25 to 30% of a second film was already shot during the original production, including several major musical sequences the studio is almost certain to incorporate. Production on the sequel could begin as early as late 2026 or early 2027, with Lionsgate eyeing a release sometime in late 2027 or the first half of 2028. Jaafar is expected to return in the lead role, though Lionsgate hasn't announced an official title or a confirmed release date. Here's where the numbers get genuinely staggering. Michael was made on an initial budget of roughly $150 million, with the Jackson estate later funding additional reshoots reported at somewhere between $25 and $50 million on top of that, all necessitated by the legal issue around the Chandler settlement. According to a Bloomberg report, director Antoine Fuqua and producer Graham King were originally set to earn $10 million and $6 million respectively for the film, figures that jumped considerably once reshoots were ordered, with King receiving an additional $10 million and Fuqua an additional $15 million to finish the reworked film. The box office results more than justified the spending. Michael pulled in roughly $371.8 million in North America and $629.8 million internationally, crossing the billion-dollar mark during its 12th weekend in release, and officially surpassing both Bohemian Rhapsody and Oppenheimer to become the highest-grossing music biopic ever made. As for Jaafar himself, his exact salary for the first film hasn't been officially confirmed by the studio. Widely circulated social media reports have claimed a figure around $8 million, with some claiming he pledged to share portions of it with his cousin Paris Jackson. But those specific numbers haven't been verified by any major entertainment outlet, so they should be treated as unconfirmed. What is confirmed is that Jaafar is now in negotiations for significantly more money on the sequel. Sources have told outlets including In Touch and EURweb that those negotiations have created real friction within the extended Jackson family, particularly with his cousins. One source described Jaafar as loving his moment as the star of a billion-dollar movie, while acknowledging it's come at a cost to certain family relationships. Prince Jackson, Michael's son, worked as an executive producer on the film, while Prince and his sister Paris both receive financial benefits through their father's estate, regardless of Jaafar's own contract terms. What makes this story compelling isn't just the box office numbers, even though they're historic. It's the fact that a family is actively negotiating, in real time, how the most painful and disputed chapter of Michael Jackson's life gets told on screen, and who gets to tell it. Jaafar Jackson has made his hope clear that his uncle finally gets to be more than someone else's version of events. Whether Lionsgate's cameras actually go there remains to be seen. But between the legal battles already fought over the first film, and the money already reshaping relationships within the family, the story behind the story may end up being just as complicated as anything that makes it onto the screen. If this deep dive into the Michael sequel and everything surrounding it interested you, hit subscribe, because we'll be covering every update as this story continues to unfold.